Okay, if you could please tell me a little bit about how the current era compares with the special period that was just getting underway when we first got here, and what the effects are of the current oil blockade that the United States has imposed since January 29th.
There are certain similarities with the special period because Cuba was Cuba is under a blockade, leaving aside the present oil blockade, which is like the United States trying to put their knee to the neck of Cuba. But in terms of the impact of the blockade in other sectors, in health, education, parts for cars and vehicles, um, parts for agriculture, etc., there's that aspect that's very similar now as it was under the special period. For instance, at the present time, in terms of health, because of the oil blockade, because of the cancellation of so many flights, because of the fact that Cuba is in the list of state sponsors of terrorism and thus doesn't have access to the usual sources of finances that would be available to other countries. Cuba doesn't have a lot of resources to get things. For instance, I'm sure you know about chikungunya, the very difficult disease that started appearing in Cuba in October. The Department of Natural and Traditional Medication developed a homeopathic treatment for treating the long-term pains and joint pains and problems with movement that so many people, the majority of people who suffered from chikungunya are suffering from that 3 to 6 months later. I myself had that. The homeopathic medication, which is fabulous, at the present time was produced for a brief period of time, but now can't be because of the lack of medicinal alcohol. And the homeopathic pharmacy obviously is not going to use alcohol that an individual brings in because they need to be very, very careful with everything they use and be able to defend it. I'm actually getting acupuncture and laser therapy at the moment, which are very effective. And the young woman, Cheryl Reyes, a 27-year-old doctor, she lives, the center is here in Vedado, and she lives in Arroyo Naranjo, which is 12 kilometers away. She walks every single day the 12 kilometers, leaving her home before 6 in the morning to get to the center because she, as she says, Susana, I'm committed to my profession and I'm committed to my patients. Well, the Ministry of Transport recently dedicated, I believe it's 30 vehicles, electric small buses, to helping to bring medical people into the hospitals, into the polyclinics. It's not that they pick them up at home. They have meeting points in different municipalities. For instance, this young doctor doing acupuncture and laser therapy, starting last week, can now walk several blocks from her house and she gets a ride into work. Cuba is not sitting back as a defeated country, quite the contrary.
So the reports of the death of this country are greatly exaggerated?
The reports that all that's happening is Cuba is that people are just suffering, sitting back, hoping that the Americans will come in, are absolutely not only exaggerated, but lies. That people are suffering, there's no question. That in areas of the country there is hunger. There's not enough food for all kinds of reasons. there's no question. But that people are not giving up and will defend their right to decide their own future is absolutely intact. And not only that, but the country is looking at lots of ways. How do we try to maintain? Here, I'll get my kitty out of the way. Yeah.
Okay, Peter.
Yeah. How do we try to maintain as normal a life as we can under what is a really abnormal situation where we have the knee to our neck? For instance, people outside the country would probably be surprised to know that the National Theatre and the National Symphony are still functioning. But rather than having a number of activities a week, they're providing performances Saturdays and Sundays. And a lot of their musicians and some of the ballet dancers are walking to perform. We are celebrating the 65th anniversary of INDER, which is the Cuban Sports Institute. Normally what Cuba does is at the provincial level and at the national level, they hold competitive sports for all ages. They can't do that right now. There's no transport. So what have they done? What have they done is that they have municipalized all of it. At all municipal levels, the sports activities were being held for all ages in celebration of the sports ministry. That's by way of saying that there are certain international events that have been postponed. The International Book Fair.
Jazz Festival.
In February. The International Habano cigar event has been postponed. But it's not to say that book activities connected with the book fair are not taking place at municipal levels, or that book launchings are not taking place that are made available through social media to people. There are also lots of initiatives at local. Oh, another very interesting thing. This is happening now in Havana. It's happened in Santa Clara province. It's happening in Ciego de Avila province. Private owners of electric vehicles, even if they don't have all their documentation in order, are being provided the opportunity by the state to get temporary documentations that will let them work providing public transport. In Ciego de Avila, what they're doing with those who have come forth is that they're using the private electrical transport to provide transportation for dialysis patients to get to the hospitals to get their treatment. In some areas, what they're doing with people who need dialysis is that rather than having them come in every day, which they can't because of transport, they're keeping them in hospital 5 days a week to provide dialysis, and then facilitating that they're home for 2 days. There's a lot of community projects right now that are focusing on how do we take organic waste and turn it not only into fertilizer, but turn it into household usable energy for cooking, for fuel, because there is a concern, because there's not only a shortage of fuel for transport and for the thermoelectric plants, which increases the number of blackouts, but there's also shortages of cooking fuel.
Right.
So
$7 or something like this?
Yeah. So people go out and cut trees.
Right.
And there's been a problem of deforestation in areas surrounding semi-urban and urban areas to get charcoal. Right. So I think it's called a biodigester. that would,
Generators? Yeah.
yeah, that would actually turn organic waste into usable fuel. There's a lot of initiatives at local community levels for growing food. Turning areas that are not being used into community-based productive areas. And a lot of education going on with that, with the kids, with elders. There's a lot of concern about, well, let me go back and explain two things very important about Cuba that we don't have in Canada or in the United States. And that is that Cuba has a very strong historical value of collectivity and of solidarity among people, so that it is a natural thing. For instance, Cuba has an elder population that's quite large proportionally. And it is not uncommon for neighbors to check on their elders who live alone and find out, can I go to the bodega, to the ration store for you? Are you okay? Do you need something? I'm considered an elder, but I'm actually quite a healthy elder. But even so, my neighbors will occasionally check on me. Do you need something? Can we take your garbage out? That kind of collective value is very intact and very operative in Cuba. So you don't have people who are alone, really alone. For instance, in many cases, if my neighbors don't see me for 2 days, they'll come and knock on my door. They'll jump my gate and knock on the door to find out, are you sick? We haven't seen you even watering your plants on your veranda. That value is also a value that is in the government and in the military. So that the kind of decapitation strikes that the US thinks, along with its partner Israel, will bring down Iran or Lebanon or Hezbollah or Hamas. First of all, it doesn't work there. And it didn't work in Venezuela. You don't bring down one person and bring down a government. And in Cuba, it would never work, because the government, even though because it's made up of human beings, makes mistakes that are Cuban grown, that have nothing to do with the blockade, but there's a very strong collectivity. If you were to take out the president, someone else would come in. If you were to take out the whole leadership, the military would come in, because this is a military that is very unified, very ideological, and very decentralized as well. In other words, it would be very difficult, unlike in many other countries, it would be virtually impossible for the US to try to corrupt the military in Cuba. These are values, the collectivity, the solidarity that have been very much emphasized since the start of the revolution, even before independence, as values within the revolutionary process. But to go back to the fact, Cubans are highly creative and highly inventive. Part of it has been compelled by a 60-year blockade, and part of it is compelled by the fact that that is in the nature of the Cuban character. For instance, one of the things that North Americans and Canadians would be very, very interested to know is that Cuba has an important medication, has very many important medications, but one that is called NeuroSim gives very successful responses to Alzheimer's. In fact, Dr. Bill Blanchett from the United States has been coming here with his patients who have Alzheimer's to receive that treatment. And he has been absolutely flabbergasted by the impact of people who not only are improving a little bit, but are recovering their mental faculties, their ability to read, their ability to speak, their ability to dance.
My sister-in-law would benefit from that, and my brother is probably overtaxed from being a supportive husband. So I understand very, very personally.
Exactly. There's a very, very interesting documentary on this produced by Belly of the Beast, which I highly recommend your listeners to listen to. But there's a sense in which the blockade, and Canada is a certain junior partner of the blockade.
Especially under Mark Carney, yes.
Exactly. The 8 million, which is nothing, of humanitarian aid is not coming directly to Cuba. It's going through the United Nations. Why isn't Canada sending oil tankers to this country? I know why, because at his speech in Davos, where Mark Carney is talking about the end of the international global order, he's not questioning the economic underpinnings. What he is proposing is a polite exploitation, is a polite global order where we continue to exploit other countries for their resources. But what's happening is because of these kinds of measures from the United States and from Canada, it is important to realize two things. Not only does the blockade, the oil blockade accelerates it, lead to ultimately the deaths of Cubans, it is also provoking the deaths of North Americans and of Canadians, because we do not have access to the advances that Cuba makes in its biotechnology. Did you just stopped it?